yet. I will continue to overindulge until such time as medical science
professionals advise you otherwise.
Catches up with my coffee addiction and tells me not to do it anymore. I've given up everything else. It's all I have left, damn it. Speaking of my inevitable coffee-related death. So I think we said we were talking about death the other day. Mm-hmm. So, I think that's a good topic to cover.
Yeah, specifically characters and how it works in role-playing games.
I mean, we can talk about our own inevitable deaths if you want to. I think that might be a bit of a hard...
Bit of a downer.
Yeah, hard subject to sort of get into.
Yes.
A little bit. Easy question first. Life after death, yes or no?
It depends if it's fantasy or sci-fi, in my opinion.
Can you imagine trying to be
a sci-fi necromancer? Oh, an atheist
in fantasy. Yeah. Like where you've got active... What do you mean you don't believe in God? We can actively see them. Yeah. It'd be like being a flat earther.
People would say that they were aliens, not gods.
Yes.
Maybe. Or they were monsters from the deep, or they were... Do you know what I mean? There's always two sides to that coin.
Yeah.
Because of the
Although
unknown.
I had a fun... This is going to be a tangent, but I had a fun idea. I like the idea that the sort of magic is intrinsic in clerics. And their devotion actually sort of
through that behaviour they generate.
Yeah, so I wrote a magic system once that was basically that wizards created spells through logic. X equals Y, therefore Z will happen.
The wizards are almost scientists.
Wizards were scientists, they were convincing themselves to allow their inner magic to come out through their logical rationale. And then clerical stuff was based entirely on faith. I love God, God loves me, I want this to happen, therefore God will make it happen. So it was a little bit more chaotic, but a little bit easier to sort of achieve. So the logical rationale always happened the way that you expected it to happen because you rationalised it, but then the sort of the belief structure.
That's interesting. Interesting thing to play around with.
It was a difficult sell.
I don't think so. I think the faith thing is sort of 40k-esque. So you have the Emperor thing and the miracles.
And the orcs.
And then you also have the orcs.
But we're talking about magic systems, and we should be talking about death.
Well, yes. Say you're going to GM a system where death is like a more lethal system. So death is, maybe not always, but can always, depending on player decision, can always be a consequence. Yeah. So some systems work like that. Horror systems maybe. Cthulhu. You're pretty, you're just regular people. So
if you don't die in Cthulhu, I think you've done something wrong.
Some people should die in Cthulhu, yeah, definitely. Very often I think GMs of Cthulhu should die, but that's a separate topic. How do you communicate that to your players? Because it's not fair for people to die if they don't understand that that's necessarily on the cards.
Yeah.
Because not every system has that. D&D doesn't have that, really.
I think when you're starting out, you need to have those discussions. What kind of tone do you want to go for?
Okay.
What tone are we going to go for in this? Within that, you need to figure out whether or not death is going to be likely. Mm-hmm. So if you're playing the super happy unicorns of Fluffy Land,
yes,
chances are death isn't going to be an option.
There's a Power Rangers role-play game. I'm sure there is. Or there's a G.I. Joe. I imagine death doesn't come up too much in those.
No, because if it's aimed towards younger audience. But interestingly, it's also... So I played a really good game called Kasplat.
Oh yes, I think I've heard you talk about Kasplat before.
I think it's MacGuffin Games made it. And it was Ross B something. Can't quite remember. We'll put it in the description. That treats character death, but death isn't necessarily dying. I think we need to sort of separate or make a distinction between being taken out of the game and dying.
So you're sort of narratively taken off scene, off script. That doesn't have to be linked to death, so that might open it up to more family-related play.
Yeah. So if you're, I mean, I think we can maybe have a discussion about that, sort of making things family-friendly and that kind of stuff. Another point. But I think when it comes to that, I think, if you're playing like a kids on bike scenario,
Yeah.
If you're in the middle of Goonies, murking a child isn't going to be a great experience.
Yes, yeah.
Necessarily. I mean, it depends on the individual, I suppose. But what you can do is, okay, you fell off your bike and you've gone home crying. Do you know what I mean?
So that's the end of your adventure.
You get a phone call. Your mum is driving by and sees
you hear your name called out down the street.
Yeah, or you hear the whistle and you have to go home for your tea, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think you can reframe death.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately what we're discussing doesn't. The point is, I think what we're discussing doesn't necessarily have to be the end of your mortal existence.
Sure.
It can be framed as anything you like. I mean, ultimately the actions within are the same. Ultimately, that character won't be able to take part in the adventure anymore. But I think death.
It's the end of that character's
death is shorthand for
Yeah.
not playing anymore. And I think the start of your session or your session 0 or the bit where you meet down the pub to discuss what game you're going to play, whatever it is that you do to start with, that's when you need to decide how you're going to approach that. You need to sit down with your players as a GM and say, how do you want to make death or deal with death within the game?
And you have to get your players to be okay with it as well, because there's no point saying, I want to run, again, I have pretty poor D&D knowledge, but I know Death of Strahd is a long-term campaign in D&D, right? There's no point running a game like that that's going to be 12 to 18 months maybe, and not talking about character death until month 4, where you've already invested loads into it, and all of a sudden you get zeroed really quickly because someone's damaged you. For a mechanic which is common is, if the damage total is twice your maximum HP, you're dead outright. So that's in some RPG systems, right? So the first time you realise that mechanic shouldn't be the first time it's happening to you.
Yeah.
That's feel bad.
I mean, that's it. And these things should be discussed. Hopefully, especially if you're going to be embarking on a longer campaign, hopefully everybody will have enough familiarity with the rules to really understand when death is going to happen and how death is going to happen if you're including it in your game. What has to happen is you have to have enough familiarity with the gameplay as a player, and we'll talk about sort of player response to death in a bit, but as a player you need to know at the very least how your health stacks up and what it means when you reach the end of your health, unless you're playing Imperial Maledictum, which is the 40k game, which to this day, despite having lost quite a few characters in that game, I'm still not 100% sure how or why they've died. But I think that I fully appreciate that that's a me problem, not necessarily a GM problem.
I don't recall that one being a problem. I think I probably grasped it. But then everybody has their blind spots, right? For all my loving of lots of RPG stuff, I can't get my head around the complexities or the bulge of D&D systems that you have to learn if you want to level up. You've got to specialise in 17 different things and decide whether the blade of your knife is slightly curved or serrated, and then the consequences that will have in 3 months' time because you're trying to build a particular character. But like that stuff is kind of maybe a step too far for me. I was never an end game MMORPG guy. I was a let's make a character and have fun type of guy. So maybe that's just my level of understanding. That's something I think if you're GMing as well. I like games that have death in them. I think it's a useful consequence, and it's a useful boundary, and I think it creates cinematic moments if it does come up.
So if you like death as a GM, when do you think you should implement it as an option? So obviously the overhanging threat of death can help character development and gameplay in general, but there's going to be moments where you really want to kind of raise the stakes to really make it put. When do you as a GM like to do that? When do you like to make sure?
So there's a couple of different systems I run reasonably frequently, or I've run a lot of. So one is the Alien role-playing game, which is a really simple answer to that. There's lots of environmental stuff. Contextually, everybody knows, right? Don't take your spacesuit off when you're in space. You're going to die.
Always worry if you're in the dangly wet chain room.
Precisely. In horror games like that, a lot of it we've spoken, and the group have spoken that we play with have spoken about. A lot of the key with delivering good horror sessions is not revealing the big bad guy too early, right? It's the fake outs. It could be this, and then twisting it and keep people guessing, right? So in that environment, you can do stuff like environmental storytelling. So if you're playing Predator, there isn't a system, I don't think, but if there is, whatever. So one thing a Predator likes to do is take trophies. So you show that to your players. You show the bodies, the leftover bits of a body of a trophy where the skull has been removed or whatever, and you're saying this thing there's lethality, yeah, and it's real lethality. With the alien thing, when you're talking about death and ratcheting up the tension, people understand the universe, generally speaking. Generally speaking, you would save stuff like the death for poor player decisions, because there aren't just xenomorphs and aliens, there are other things in there as well that can really damage you. But it's really when you're dealing with those, for want of a better words, different alien creatures, that's when you're really ratcheting that tension up. The rest of it is kind of like that creepy tension.
Yeah.
But then when you actually come down to anything that involves initiative order, it should be communicated fairly clearly through context.
I suppose in regards to having that show don't tell kind of thing, do you sort of, when people are making bad decisions, are you the kind of person that's like, this is going to result in character death? I know as the GM, I've spotted that they're about to leave without putting their spacesuit on.
Yeah.
I've spotted, they're sort of telling the sort of cyberpunk gang boss what they think about their wife. They've made a real big error.
How are you getting the player to sign off on the risk?
Yeah. Or how are you as a GM? Do you as a GM sort of say, just to be very clear? So when I've done things like that, I've said, just to be very clear, you are driving towards a cliff using your butt cheeks on the steering wheel, facing backwards while juggling.
Yeah.
This is a dangerous situation for you to be in. Are you sure you want to go ahead with this role? Or are you sure you wouldn't like to change the situation? I tend to give people a sort of a clear option for maybe backpedaling.
Yeah. You give them like a one last, almost like it's not a conscience thing, is it? But it's, you're trying to pull them out of an emotional thought process.
Yeah.
To go, are you down? Are you actually down? And then continue on.
Yeah. I mean, especially considering I tend to go theatre of the mind. I tend to have, I don't tend to sort of focus in on maps and layouts and things like that. Often when I'm saying to somebody, are you sure you want to carry on with this? Or are you sure you want to kind of go in? It's less about giving them a warning, more about making sure that I as a GM have explained the situation.
Yeah, you're just double checking that there's an understanding.
Because quite often, and when I've had player deaths in my games, I've said, you drive off the cliff and you die. There's no magic button that's going to come and save you. And somebody said, well, I didn't know there was a cliff there. So I feel like I may have described that thoroughly in the moment, but I think sometimes when that happens, if they say, I didn't know that there was a cliff there, I feel I've not succeeded as a GM because that cliff should be obvious.
Yeah, I think that's a good tactic to use. The honest answer is, depending on the circumstances, there's probably a couple of different things that you could do, right? I have had a character in Cyberpunk face down with a van that was driving at them. Now, vans do 66 damage, which is pretty high for Cyberpunk damage, right? And I don't know if there is a thing about armour, because armour is in Cyberpunk, and generally you would reduce armour from damage. In this circumstance, I made it abundantly clear the player was coked up on synth coke. They were like fully in combat mode. They are a solo leaning rocker boy, so they're really playing the role. They're doing a great job role playing it.
Body armor isn't going to do much against a
A
van.
van will not. Body armor won't save you from a van, and that was what I used to communicate the risk. I said, just so you know, if you're going to play chicken with a van and it hits you, your armor will not be taken into account, because I don't think it would be when you hit a van and it drives over you. And the player went, I understand that completely. I'm playing chicken with the van. So that was a way of me saying, there's a real risk here. The risk is that the extra damage that you would have negated will go straight through.
Yeah.
So that's like a soft check on it. And then I've also had in Cyberpunk, in the previous session that I ran last night, players went into a bar and there's one player who has a vendetta against this NPC who's part of a gang. NPC's at the back of the bar. Already they had figured out through net running and stuff that the bar was trapped, and the player decided halfway through the session to double move, so all of their action was going to be to move across this bar to get right beside this NPC.
I think I've done something similar in Cyberpunk, and I think that would basically land you in front of somebody with no opportunity to really dodge.
You just get close to them, right?
But
that player character had forgotten that there was traps, because it had been 40 minutes since we talked about it.
Yeah.
And they asked if they could. Well, fair enough. I have no complaints with the player character. They asked if there was a way that they could make a perception roll to try and avoid any of those things. And my thing was, I said to him, I'm going to say no, because the way you described disengaging from combat A, using your entire movement to solely focus on getting close to this other person, I think thematically you haven't done that. Yeah. And now I'm revealing those traps, then unlucky. It is what it is, right? Mm-hmm. As it happened, the rolls of the traps were awful. The player character still got there and everything moved on and there were no bad feelings. But if you warn people about there being traps and they decide to charge forward, then I'm comfortable saying to a player, without being a dick about it, right? But like, you guys have had that information and your description was so overt that your entire priority was closing the gap, mm-hmm. that you've triggered the traps. So here are the repercussions.
But I think you sort of put the finger on it there, from a GM's point of view at least, with the no bad feelings.
Yeah.
And I think that's ultimately, for me, what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
We're telling a story, and we're having fun telling that story. And I think if somebody gets taken out of that story, or a character gets taken out of that story,
yeah,
what you need to be sure of, ultimately, is that there's not going to be bad feelings above the table.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you know what I mean? And that everybody, so making sure everybody's on the same page in regards to death is a possibility, or being taken out is a responsibility. Going back to sort of what we said at the beginning, we need to make sure that the death that is occurring contextually within the story is going to be meaningful, or at the very least is going to be telegraphed, as in, you do this, you're going to potentially sort of come across it. And we need to make sure, I think, to a certain extent, that everybody is on board and knowing the situation that's about to occur. Quite often when I've killed characters, I've tried my best to make sure that sort of stuff is mediated. I've tried to make sure that all that kind of situation is sort of check every box. Players still get salty, about the situation. And I think sometimes, I mean, that I think might boil down to just general table etiquette, and you have to be understanding that, especially if it's a long campaign and mm-hmm. somebody's put a lot of time and energy and effort into creating these characters and growing attached to these characters, you have to be okay that perhaps just in the moment at least, there's going to be a lot of emotion and perhaps negative feeling about that kind of thing in the moment. I think what you need to sort of preface is to make sure that when you can kind of come back to that after that emotion has died away, make sure that you can kind of justify why they were in that kind of situation.
Yeah, I think it's easy to get caught up in it.
Yeah.
And it's important that You've put, as a GM, lots of work in, or certainly a lot of time in, to creating a world for this adventure to take part in. And if you're playing whatever system and people aren't respecting the world in terms of the social construct, or they're being deliberately obtuse and causing problems for you as a GM, then that doesn't feel good, right? And in the same way, if you've put lots of work into, your players put lots of work into creating their character, and if the rug is pulled and they're dead immediately, that won't feel good. So this is maybe something that we can talk on when we flip over to the player side of things.
Yeah.
But both parties have got a responsibility when there's death to make it meaningful or handle it appropriately. The player will, lots of times, the player will want to go down like Bruce Willis in Armageddon or whatever. I think, does he die in Armageddon?
Yeah, I think it's
right on the rock or something.
Been a while.
So they want that. So you want to be able to give them that. You want to be able to give them that feeling. Every death will not be that consequential, right?
No.
But you have to handle it. You have to give them their moment without making it entirely about that player. So maybe let's pause for a couple of minutes, refill our teas and our coffees, and then come back on the other side of the table and see how we handle things how we handle death as players.
The one last thing I will say on death, and this is something that everybody should understand, using it to punish people for being a dick at the table is perfectly acceptable.
Okay. On that note, let's get some refreshments. Pettiness does not beget a long-standing table.
No, this is true, but this is why I only ever kill people.
You rarely kill people.
I rarely kill people. I mean, that should be something that we sort of preface as well, because I tend to run, when I run games, I tend to run wacky hijinks, which I don't feel. Basically, when you're doing wacky hijinks, you're only ever really going to die if you've done something monumentally stupid. I mean, I have killed people in the past, and also when playing games, I will do it as well. But yeah, I think I tend to aim for the light rules kind of thing. So I tend to be about telling the story, and it's only if it's story relevant that I tend to sort of execute that people. Type of... This is why I sort of prefaced the conversation with the goat being sent home, or the you're out of play for X amount of time. Yeah. Because I do tend to be the person that's playing you're all bunny rabbits trying to steal a carrot, and then I tend to go for Peter Rabbit rather than Watership Down, just because of my own personal childhood trauma. It's establishing those kind of things.
It's taste as well.
Yeah.
Right. It's also because equally you're quite happy to play in. I don't mind throwing out first names of people, I guess. But you're quite happy to play in one of Joe's Cthulhu games, where we know death is super available to any character in Cthulhu, right? Or you'll quite happily play in my games, which, with the exception of probably, I think, of my Cyberpunk games, the death was there the whole time. Yeah.
I think as a player, I think my record of your games is that we played an 8-week campaign and I died 4 times.
I think it was 12. Was it 12 weeks? I think it was,
yes.
It was longer.
Yes, it was a couple of extra weeks. Because we tend to only play 8-week campaigns in our home group.
Yeah.
Just so we can sort of go through various different games and GMs and things like that.
Yeah.
So we did 12 weeks at a time and I died 4 times. I was quite proud of it. And to be fair, I played a necromancer who refused to die.
Coming back.
And but that's as a player. As a player, I'm quite happy to die. Maybe arguably too happy to die on occasion, which also has its issues, which we can discuss. Being too willing to get murdered, or to go.
I feel like I could be like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like with Taste of Epsilon 57 at the end, I really wanted to do the Chaos thing.
Yeah.
Which Taste of Epsilon was a AdMech character in our Imperium Maledictum game. And I sort of had a bit of chaos going on after like 3 or 4 campaigns that we'd done. So after, I think we'd played for almost a year's worth of sessions across 4 years or something. And by the end of it, I fancied a change, and I was chasing the chaos thing.
Yeah.
And it was hard to pull back from that, because it got like, some sessions I was like, I really want to change it, and then the next session I was like, this character has been developed for so long, and felt like there was such a home for that person.
But I think ultimately, when you're sort of in a position, I've got to the stage a couple of times where either I'm in a long-running campaign and maybe I'm getting a bit bored of that character, or as a player, talking about death as a player, I think I've been in situations where I've got bored with a character. So going on to the subject of being a player, I think death as from the point of view of a player rather than a GM, again, it's coming back to that understanding, that session zero, that sort of respecting that we've got we are telling a story, and sometimes that story is going to involve our character not being able to achieve anymore. But I've definitely been in positions as a player where I feel that my character has done all my character is going to be able to do. I've set out a backstory that's been more or less resolved,
or explored,
or even I as a person have just got a bit bored of this character after a couple of years of playing, or a couple of more than a few sessions of playing. I feel like I've done, as a player, all I can with this character. So I'm happy to look for a way for this character to leave the campaign, and I'm happy for that to be a monumental sacrifice, or and I think often when that's the case, I have approached my GM and said, I'm looking to change character. If we're in a situation where this guy's going to die, or be in mortal danger and things like that, I'm not going to necessarily seek it out, but don't be afraid to make sure I'm coming to the end of this character. I'm happy to. I want to be in a situation where I can make a new one. Don't be afraid if we're in a situation where this character will die or could die, to let that happen. Because I think from a player's perspective, when I've been playing in games, I've seen there be a lot of trepidation from the GM in killing off my character. Whether that's because I get the impression that quite often the GM is worried that I'm going to get salty if anything happens to my guy. And I quite often will say, don't be afraid, I'll be fine with it. And I don't like to kind of force myself into situations where I'm going to get murked, but I want to make it clear to the GM, particularly in one-shots and convention games and things like that. I say we didn't really cover convention game death before, but quite often in conventions, the kind of unwritten rule is don't let anyone die within the first 2 hours. So because if somebody's paying for a 4-hour game, they're going to want 4 hours, or they're going to want a couple of good hours of content, and that kind of thing beforehand.
That's true.
So
and that goes for, like, if you're a paid GM as well, because I've done some stuff on Start Playing, and very often with my alien stuff, my primer on death is it's the alien universe. Or this is my primer on Veils and X's and O's and all those things. It's the alien universe. You should know what you're getting into. I will do my best to make sure that nobody dies within the first hour or whatever, or 2 hours. But beyond that, I'll try my best to have replacement characters available if it makes sense for the story. You're certainly welcome to continue to be part of the group and watch and enjoy it and all that kind of stuff. But there has to be some kind of death. I think as a player, what can work really nicely as well is if you're just fed up with your character and you want to change stuff. I can't remember who it was. I can't remember. I think I was a GM. and somebody died. Maybe it was my Warhammer character Theta. The death was quite abrupt. I think it was actually Theta. The group didn't know that the change was coming, and the way the GM delivered the death felt unfair to the group. Because you didn't have the information that I had, that I've had enough and this is going to change.
Yeah.
And the group really rallied and was like, okay,
we're going to try and stop
work the problem, try and stop this. And it took 2 or 3 times of me saying, no, it's okay, like, it's fine, but it can be, if you do it like subtly with the GM and have those conversations, you can really sort of actually embrace it, even if the moment isn't Bruce Willis in Armageddon and, you know, the climax of the entire campaign, or you're jumping with the nuke into whatever. You know, it's not always going to be like that, because it's not an action hero, it's not an action movie, and if it was, there'd be 5 Arnold Schwarzeneggers in every one, or however many player characters you have, and you have to balance stuff. So there might be moments where you can be like that against certain big bad guys and have those, but you aren't always going to be able to. So you can have stuff in other ways. So you can do, like, if you are a GM and a player, and you're on both sides of that, then you can do stuff like the show don't tell, like the environmental storytelling, in a slightly sacrificial way that could be really impactful for the group. And could kind of galvanise them moving forwards.
I think you have to be within the kind of player category of death. We have to talk about the fact that sometimes you have to be open with the rest of the group as a player as well. You have to be, like, say, I think when your Warhammer character died, if I remember correctly, I think you might have mentioned it to me.
Potentially. It was around corruption, and we weren't in combat. Which I think is why it worked.
Making sure that the rest of the people in the group, or the rest of the people at the table, are aware this is okay.
Don't chase it. Don't
because the last thing you want is for you to be sort of holding the nuke, and somebody else to go, no, I'll hold the nuke. No, I'm Spartacus. Do you know what I mean? Because then they're going to die, and you're going to be stuck with the character that you're
trying to get rid of.
You're trying to get rid of.
And then you basically have a new party. There's something to be said there about, being a bit grown up about it. Because you don't want to abuse death mechanics as a player necessarily, because there's stuff like, if you're playing games like Shadow Dark or stuff where it's super dangerous, or your Dragonbane escapades, where you can have lots of deaths quite quickly. Luckily with Dragonbane is there's a bit of comedy in that game as well, and the table we had, it worked really nicely because the dice killed you more than your decisions sometimes. And it felt like the dice really didn't like you, but every time
they were telling a very specific story for me on
consistently, like across several weeks. But you're right, like, you need to be slightly grown about it, because it's not just your time. So you cannot run into a room, die, or be dismembered and be bleeding out, and not clearly communicate to other people that if this is the end, it's the end, and have them then chase after you. I'm thinking of particular examples, but I won't go into more detail. But like, it happens. I'm sure it happened in Cyberpunk. It may well. I think it happened in Dragonbane.
I think I played a Cyberpunk game with you where it wasn't even the first session. I think it was like the little bit of play towards session zero, the end of session 0.
Oh yeah.
Where I was like, my character sort of thought that he had a really cunning plan, and you were like, this guy's just going to shoot you in the face. I was like, no, that checks out.
It works logically.
I mean, I don't like it, but all the dominoes. And I think sometimes you can get that as well, where you sort of put yourself in a position where you're like, you know what, I thought this was a really good idea. Or the kind, here's my logical leap that I've created. But no, you're absolutely right. I've just done something monumentally stupid.
I did that as a GM in that same campaign, because one of the bosses that you guys fought was in like a room of traps and everything like that, and you very quickly figured something out, the power, or I don't know, it was something, and you did a thing, and all of the traps were disarmed. And it was meant to be like a snakes and ladders of traps, this room, and very quickly it was just, I was sat there going, the logic checks out. So you've just bypassed 12 traps, and it's now the four of you and this one guy.
We could have a whole thing about, I think we could have a whole chat about when your players think outside of the box that you've created for them. And it just like, you know what, you've done this in a way that I didn't think was possible. Go for it.
Yeah, you have to reward it.
Yeah,
you do have to reward, especially it can feel a bit. You can as a GM feel a bit salty if you've created stuff like that. And that particular Cyberpunk campaign was the first campaign that I'd GM'd for that group, and I'd only been with the group I think for about 3 months at that point. So it was very new. It was lots of newness. Yeah. And I remember feeling a bit like, oh, well, that big set piece is gone. I don't love that. But I wasn't going to sit there and argue with the group of people who'd just totally done me over. Because you'd done it.
That's it. And, but again, as a player, you have to kind of be in a situation where you've just got to kind of respect what's happening. And I think ultimately it all comes down to being respectful, being understanding, and understanding that ultimately it's you're telling a story, and all the best stories involve sacrifice and the potential for risk. If there isn't a potential for risk, if there isn't a potential for sacrifice, then ultimately you might be telling the wrong kind of story.
For me, I think it doesn't have to be the highest cinematography. No. It doesn't have to be. It can be quick, it can be unexpected, it can be prolonged, it can be whatever. But I guess from both sides, you have to, if it's happening, right? If you're in that situation, it's happening. If you're a GM, don't pull your punches, because your bad guys aren't the enemies from Power Rangers. Who just kind of like flail their arms around and get beat up. Like, they have brains. It's going to feel bad when 3 of your bad guys attack one person. But if that's the way that the room looks and that makes sense, that's what would happen. So do that thing. And then embrace whatever the death looks like in that moment, because it will only add to the storytelling. It will, imagine this. I think I might have a problem with death. But imagine this, right? You're in this big fight, whatever. You've got 4 or 5 players, all but one die in that scenario. You then have an amazing opportunity for all those players to create new characters. You have an amazing story arc for this highly traumatized character to come out of that situation, put a new crew together, maybe do some vengeance, or change their ways, or that's the storytelling there is so compelling. How often do you think that situation comes up? I bet you hardly ever.
Hardly ever.
Hardly ever.
But then I think ultimately,
which is probably the correct amount of times. But if you find yourself in that situation, but don't stop yourself from finding yourself there.
I think ultimately, and again, this is something that we'll touch on probably in the future. One of the issues that I find is that I've kind of trained a little bit more as a storyteller. So because of that, I have a little bit more of an understanding that quite often flaws and sacrifice and things like that do make for a better overall story. The issue that you sort of have with role play in particular is that the people that are at your table haven't necessarily taken, they're not sort of following that kind of level of storytelling. They're following we want to be cool people doing cool things level, which is brilliant. I'm not in any way decrying. I'm not saying that everybody that comes to your table should do their masters in.
Some will be there to hang out with people. Some will be there to do casual stuff. Some will be there looking for storytelling stuff. You're right. There's different degrees of.
You have to respect the fact that not everybody's going to have that level of attitude towards storytelling, and you as a GM or you as a player have to not facilitate that, but you have to kind of almost encourage people to understand that this will make the story better.
Yeah, you have to coach them. And part of that is your world building and your table management and your player management and all that kind of stuff. There's lots of different ways of doing that.
But I don't think that's necessarily just the role of the GM. I think that's something that, as a player, you can facilitate. You can.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the GM is not responsible for the story at the table. The GM is the facilitator of the story at the table. The story is being told by everybody.
Yeah, and don't overestimate like you say, don't overestimate your part as a player, because the GM is responsible for the world and everybody in it. So you're responsible for one person.
Mm-hmm.
So you can definitely, if you've got experience, or even if you don't have experience, but you're just motivated to create something that's the most enjoyable experience possible, like lean in, give accents to it, without challenging your GM necessarily, because you can get a bit, salty, or maybe salty is not. You can feel exposed as a GM, right?
Yeah.
So if the GM is giving you the description of a room, maybe, but they haven't told you what it smells like, for example, then you might say, okay, cool. As I'm looking around, do I smell anything in particular? And you can fill in those spaces and sort of aid the GM, and the GM will see that and go, smells. I hadn't thought about smells. Let me think about that going forward.
But then I think again that comes to a different topic of player storytelling.
I'm getting sidetracked.
But it's all right. But ultimately, I think that's what it comes down to as a player experiencing death, is that you have to make sure that it's right for your character, accept when you've made mistakes, and if other people are dying at the table as well, respect that and respect the story that they're telling in that moment. Don't brush over. I think, don't be sort of, Bob's character has died. Yeah. Cool. What next? Or making jokes or things
Bob
like that.
Too.
Yeah, or making jokes making sure that you're not going to cheapen the moment for that person. Yeah. Because respecting that person might be in an emotional frame of mind because of what's just happened. And making sure that you're not kind of taking that moment away from them as well.
I've had plenty of characters die. When we played Wrath and Glory, the first campaign I was with the group that we meet with, I died as in the first or second round of combat against the big bad on the Erebus, and I was a great character. I really enjoyed my character. He had a ship named after him for a while, and the death
I think it's still named after him.
There's some other names attached to it now, but but the death was really quick, and I felt like maybe I didn't have a whole lot I could do in that moment to avoid it, and I felt a bit emotional about it because I was new to the group and my character had just died and blah blah blah, and despite the fact that I was totally okay with the death, because I was, but despite me going, everything here is cool, you can have the best possible intentions and still not want to talk about it immediately. Because you're processing, like, you've created this thing and now it's gone publicly, disappeared in whatever way. You have so much control, but not total control over how it happens and all this kind of stuff. And the first thing people do at the end of the session will be turn to you and say, "Are you okay?" And the answer is, I can't feel feelings right now. I'm floating, but so I am okay.
I think I saw something recently that sort of was sort of basically saying that quite often the emotions and the attachment and the memories created by imagination are as connected to us as the memories created by actual living. Ooh. So the memories of our characters are going to have, connections in potentially long-standing impacts. I don't know how much,
or at least accents.
I don't know how clickbaity that particular sort of topic was, but ultimately there is a connection. There is an emotional connection to characters and to even people that you're watching on TV. And if you don't respect that, and if you don't make that happen, then it can be, troublesome. But there we go.
I think that covers death.
I think that does cover death. So shall I go and get us some more drinks, and then maybe we can come back and talk about something else?
Definitely. Nothing hot this time, though. Get the barman to pour us an ale.
Jolly good. Right.
Until next time.